There you go.
Welcome everyone to the new JFK show number 273, or should we say the Casey Kasem top 10 countdown from JFK. So Larry's got some of the most important developments in JFK, and I assume in recent years. So we're going to turn over the entire program to him, and it's some stuff that we've actually done before. All right, Larry, see if you can go ahead and screen share.
Okay, screen sharing. Disable participant sharing.
Okay,
No.
just give me 1 second.
Uh-huh.
All right. Okay. Welcome to the new JFK show number 273. We've got a countdown from Larry Rivera about some of the most significant discoveries from the documents recently. And so we're going to turn it over to Larry, and hopefully I'll be able to make him the host. I'll do my best. And you're now the host, so you should be able to screen share.
All right. Hey,
there we go.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Jim and Gary. One of the documents, the first ones that came out of the release in July of 2017 that everybody just completely went gaga over, Jim and Gary remember, was the release of the contract of Earle Cabell, you know, as he was being admitted to the CIA in 1956. Earle Cabell, of course, the brother of Charles Cabell, who was deputy director of the CIA at the time of the Bay of Pigs. And he had worked under Allen Dulles. And so much information, you know, lately that has come out that Allen Dulles might have had a hand in the assassination and the CIA involvement and everything. But the revelation of Earle Cabell, Jim, was quite a surprise. I don't know what your thoughts are about that and what that could have implied in the scenario of the assassination. Any thoughts?
Well, of course, I mean, it meant the brothers. Here you had the motive with Charles, and you had the opportunity with Earle by being the mayor of Dallas to set up. Dealey Plaza was their backyard, Gary. Larry, what was striking was that he joined the CIA back in what, 56 or 57?
Yeah, 56, yeah. And what about his involvement in possibly changing the parade route or being in some way involved in that?
Well, I'm sure
being the mayor, obviously being the mayor, you know.
Yeah. I think John Connolly actually orchestrated that in a phone call on the 18th, but the mayor would have been, of course, complete agreement to bring the target into the kill zone.
Of course, would have been the one entity that would have sealed the whole thing of changing that. So anyway, the reason that this is important is because of so many of these documents, and we've talked about it, that they seem to tease out other things that might have been going on. And of course, the importance of Earle Cabell is, I think, paramount.
Yeah, wasn't he completely responsible for getting the body out of Dallas because he needed a coroner, was it?
Well, that's what we're gonna, you know, look at possibly, you know, in what we're gonna be talking about tonight. Okay, let me, I think I've paused, resume share, okay. Can you see that?
Yeah, you gotta scroll it up.
Okay, yeah, okay. So the reason that Earle Cabell now is important in all this, obviously because of what Jim just said and mentioned, but what was going on the 22nd of November, 1963, during the assassination. And we have one person who we have written about and we have talked about ad nauseum, and we have presented as a result of the research of Beverly Brunson regarding the famous No writer, who was identified as Douglas Jackson much later. And what interaction Douglas Jackson had with Mayor Cabell at Parkland Hospital, Jim, which is just going to blow you away, you know, when we talk about this. Actually, because he wrote about it. And none of the, if anybody has read my book, where I have detailed the JFK Horsemen, the 4 outriders that were riding alongside the JFK limo, and how little information we knew about these guys. We knew about Bobby Hargis and BJ Martin and James Chaney, and very little actually, as I detail in the book. Between them, they only had, I think, like 8 pages of Warren Commission testimony, which is laughable. But the case of Douglas Jackson, because in my research, I was able to establish contact with his son, Douglas Jackson Jr., and things that he was aware and other things that he was not aware of about his dad, which really come together in the book, you know. And so when this document is released about Earle Cabell, and we combine that with a document, a manuscript that Douglas Jackson wrote on the night of the 22nd of November, describing his experiences, you know, that is where these 2 documents, you know, combine and intersect to give us, you know, more insight into what happened on November the 22nd, 1963, Jim. It's really extraordinary, if you come to think of it. Now, we did this before, and it's worth repeating here and going over again, because the concept of the no rider is true, is correct. All right. And we have witnesses who saw it, who were interviewed and recorded in videotape by Mark Lane, in this case, S.M. Holland and Lee Bowers. Okay. And then later on, a confirmation by, of all people, you know, Bob Jackson, who's the guy that supposedly took that picture of Jack Ruby, you know, taking out Lee Oswald in the basement of City Hall, on the 24th of November. And where, you know, there's so much evidence and so much supporting and confirmation that this event did happen. All right, that there's just no, I mean, it's already established and it is accepted, you know, by those who, you know, have studied the case. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me make a point or two about how the Warren Commission handled this. Speculation: immediately after the shooting, a motorcycle police was seen racing up the grassy embankment to the right of the shooting scene. Period is true. Then they add, pursuing a couple seeking to flee from the overpass. Well, that would be silly. How could he be pursuing a couple fleeing from the overpass with going up on the grassy knoll? So they make a true statement and turn it into a false one by an addendum. And then they say, falsely, there are no witnesses who've ever stated this, and there's no evidence to support it. We got the grooves in the photograph right there in the grass, and as you observe, multiple witnesses. And then they talk about a motorcycle patrolman, Clyde A. Haywood, dismounted.
Yeah, right.
That was Bobby Hargis. Who the hell is Clyde A. Haywood?
Never heard of it.
I mean, this is multiple ways of distracting and distorting the evidence to make it almost impossible to discern what actually happened.
And this is published in the report. Okay, everybody would recall that the report was a small 888-page paperback size version, you know, and that's where this, okay, was published. Yeah, and it's laughable. Of course, they're trying to confuse which one of the outriders did what, as you observe, of course. And as I say, you know, liar, liar. I mean, this is a complete laughable lie, you know, and that's where Beverly Brunson was.
It's just shameful. It's just shameful. I mean, they're investigating the death of the 35th president of the United States, and they are now accessories after the fact.
And this is where the investigations of Beverly Brunson, were so important, because she's the one that poured over all this material and said, "Hey, wait a minute, this doesn't jive," and that's as all we did was follow, her leads and everything, and that's how this all came together. On the null writer, who actually, was an entity that day, and we are 100% sure it was Douglas Jackson. And who was shielded, by everybody. Nobody wanted him to be, if you go and look at all the photographs of everybody, he's the only one that you never saw a photo of. The only photos that you saw of him were taken from stills, from the videos, the film that was taken before, and right before the assassination.
But there'd have to be Dallas PD photos of him, would there not? I mean, they're going to have photos of every cop.
Yeah, I know. They deep sixed them. Yeah, I know. In fact, the FBI didn't even go chasing down these guys until 1975, 12 years later. Hey, you guys were the closest witnesses. Hey, what's going on? You guys got anything to say about what you saw?
Instead of 8 pages, there should have been 80 pages of testimony.
Exactly. 80, probably 800,
I think they were saying something like the limousine stopped, and that's when they said, hold on.
So basically, we have all this, these are interviews of other witnesses that, hey, his attention directed to the motorcycle escort that a motorcycle policeman drove up the grassy slope. That's what Simmons, remember, he was right on the overpass. Gene Simmons. No, wait,
not Gene Simmons.
not the KISS guy, but the other guy. I'm just kidding. But and then this other guy, police officer riding on the grassy knoll, the slope on the north side, of Elm Street. And he rushes up the steps, and this Johnson guy said his attention was attracted to the motorcycle escort, So
it just doesn't make any sense for the official narrative to have a motorcycle cop motoring up the grassy knoll if there were only 3 shots from above and behind. That's why they edit this out.
And this guy's a freaking hero, because anybody who goes
going towards the bullet
to gunfire, in my book, this guy's got cojones, man.
So Larry, if I would be just watching for the first time, or can you tell us about Beverly Bronson and how important she's been to JFK and your research?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about here. She wrote that the newspapers were replete with stories about what she called the motor jockey hero, and this guy went right here. I mean, she went in and read it, all the major papers, and they were talking about on the 22nd, motorcycle patrolman rode pell-mell up a railroad embankment, apparently in pursuit of the assassin. I mean, it doesn't get any more specific than that, And so then, okay, Mark Lane goes and he chases down S.M. Holland and Lee Bowers. And I don't know how you can ignore these two guys. Let's bring it back to the beginning.
You can just tell by listening to them, they're as sincere as they can be.
Real.
And a policeman throwed his motorcycle down in the middle of the street and run up the embankment with his pistol drawn. He was running toward that particular spot. And also another motorcycle policeman right behind him tried to ride up the embankment on his motorcycle, and it turned over about halfway up the embankment.
There it is.
And he got off his motorcycle and left it laying there and run on over to the fence with his gun in his hand.
Yeah, and here's S.M. Lee Bowers.
The first one to appear on the scene, other than those who, of course, who were standing around, including 2 on top of the triple underpass, was one who rode a motorcycle up the incline coming up from the lower portion of Elm Street. And he rode perhaps 2/3 of the way up or more before he deserted his motorcycle. At the time of the shooting...
Do you guys detect any of this action going on in the Z film? Okay, still not convinced. Okay. Wait a minute. What about people who are still around and who might have been there that day? How about
Yeah.
our friend, photographer Bob Jackson? All right, and he was recently interviewed by the Sixth Floor Museum. This is a guy that took that iconic Oswald shooting photograph there in the basement of City Hall, where the DPD had their headquarters. So here, Jackson, in less than 20 seconds, describes the actions of the Knoll rider in astonishing detail. Okay, and this comes from Stephen Fagan, whom we must thank, for overlooking the importance of this wonderful video in pursuit of the truth and allowing it to be placed on YouTube. And here he goes. A motorcycle cop rode his motorcycle up the grassy knoll and just let it keep running. He jumped off, the motorcycle went on until it fell over. How specific can you get here?
I mean,
So that as I surveyed the scene, just for a moment there, I could see the confusion, the bedlam, people covering up their kids. Motorcycle cop rode his motorcycle up the grassy knoll and just let it keep running. He jumped off, the motorcycle went on till it fell over.
There you go. Hello, all right, let me,
not in the Z film.
yeah.
No, that was from executive action. They were doing a reconstruction.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Now, what I wanna, let me get back online here and show you guys, because I wanna talk about Douglas in here. Can you see this here?
Yep.
All right, and how this relates to Earle Cabell, right?
Mayor of Dallas.
Dallas in 1963. Now that we know about his little dirty secret, Jim and Carrey,
Everyone, this is not a time to point fingers at everyone.
Don't you think this would have been a little convenient in the assassination of somebody who was mortal enemy of his brother?
Yeah, who fired his brother. You can find pictures standing next to Alan Dulles, for God's sake. And Lansdale.
Can you guys see this? This is right here.
I can see the fibers on her coat.
Yeah, this is Earle Cabell right here. This is his wife. This is Jackie.
And the word
Giving him the red roses instead of yellow.
And you guys know who this guy is here.
Oh yeah.
And his crony here.
Who's looking kind of serious.
Yeah, look at him. Wow.
Goes right.
I dug this photo out, from again, the Texas repository's got some really good information. Good. I'd never seen this picture before.
No,
So
It's a nasty and revealing photograph.
it sure is. It's like, hey, notice how Jackie's the only one that's smiling, Jim.
Yeah, well, Jack may be right behind her. We can't see his face.
Oh, of course, and the woman, which I suppose that's Cabell's wife,
Deary.
But nobody else except
he doesn't look like he's happy to see her. He's like, you know what? I'm about to hurt your husband. Look at Tommy up there. They both look just, the biggest.
So, why is this new revelation of Earle Cabell so important? Douglas Jackson was closely involved in the events of what happened that day, actually. Having been forgotten and ignored for many years, and with the investigations of Beverly, we now have a much clearer vision of what he went through that day, all of which is detailed in the book. Read the book.
JFK, written by Larry.
On the afternoon of the assassination, while JFK was moribund and being attended to by the Parkland doctors, Cabell was actively making sure a justice of the peace was available to sign off on JFK's death certificate and get the body the hell out of Dallas without delay. Motorcycle escort Douglas Jackson was present from the time of the assassination up until the final ride to Love Field. That's really extraordinary, Jim. The one guy that was there from the beginning, from Love Field all the way to Air Force One and Two leaving was Douglas Jackson.
He,
You know?
he might have deserved 100 pages all by himself.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? And this is the only image that we have of Jackson, next to Shaney in the videos that we have, of the motorcade up until, when they reach Dealey Plaza. Now, I want to get deeper into this, okay? There was a relationship between Henry Wade. You guys know who Henry, and this isn't the Roe v.
Yeah,
Wade
Roe
guy, the
versus
same
Wade.
guy.
Of course, he was a DA who began saying there was a conspiracy until Lyndon or Jenkins called him and said, let's not have any of that conspiracy stuff. You got your man.
Because he was telling the truth from the beginning. He was being blindsided, with all this information coming left and right. And he, at the beginning, he told the truth, and then afterwards, he had to go into the, the official version. But lo and behold, and this is something that not very many people know about this, that Henry Wade had a relationship with Harold Weisberg, and they corresponded between each other. And the reason that we have a copy of Douglas Jackson's manuscript, okay, of the 22nd of November, 1963, is because Henry Wade made it available to Harold Weisberg, all right? And Henry Wade, he has been maligned over the years, Jim and Gary, as being, the first one that said that Lee Oswald was the only one who did it. He was entirely guilty,
Yeah.
but if you look at, the pressure that he was on, and not only him, and I'm not excusing the DPD or anything like that, but the information that is there and the correspondence between him and Weisberg is very telling.
Yeah.
That they had a relationship, and that Wade indirectly, and I'm not going to say that he did it, overtly, but indirectly, he was feeding information and giving Harold information on what he was able to give him about these JFK documents in Dallas and everything. So Henry Wade has Douglas Jackson's manuscript in his own handwriting. Okay, and it's sitting there in his desk. And he goes ahead, and just so you guys, just to give you an idea, here is his letterhead, okay? And Henry Wade goes ahead and has one of his clerks type up Douglas Jackson's manuscript, of what he went through on the 22nd. Again, let me reiterate that none of the other motorcycle cops were asked to do this, okay? Only Douglas Jackson. Why? And I don't want to keep talking. Maybe you guys can throw something in their opinions or whatever,
It seems to me that Henry Wade, when it was going on, I just don't think he was one of the chosen ones that were to know. I think he was getting information from all directions and may well have believed what he said. The night when he's saying, we have all the evidence we need and all that, but it in a case it has so few good people in it, it'd be nice to know.
That sounds like something he was told to say by LBJ.
Yeah.
Well, here we go. And this is a letter, okay, where, and this is between Weisberg and Bud Festerwald, okay, and he's talking about his connection with, and he says, an official office, the identity of which but I do not want to disclose. He's talking about Henry Wade, and he's talking about Jackson's manuscript, okay, and that he was able to tease that out of there with the help of Henry Wade. I mean, this was something that was held very close to the vest, of there in regarding his manuscript. Okay, now why? That's the main question, right? Okay. And this is why this is so important, because we can go over the whole thing, but obviously, absent, we don't have that much time here, but in his personal manuscript, Douglas Jackson detailed this one, experience that he had with Earle Cabell on November the 22nd. I think this is so really important, Jim and Gary, because it defines Earle Cabell's role in, the assassination.
Getting the body out of Dallas.
Right. Well, not only that, it's getting it out with expediency. Okay.
And straight to Bethesda, so they could be in complete control of everything.
Well, get it out of there, and anybody would have thought that Earle Cabell would have known what was the protocol, to get JFK's body out of Dallas. And first it had to have gone through the autopsy of Earl Rose. Okay. I can't see you guys. Are you with me here?
Yeah, we're here. It would have been Theron Ward who eventually showed up, but this is someone other than Theron Ward who was the first JP he called.
Right. So we can start here. And this is Jackson's personal experience, with Earle Cabell, you want to help us out, Jim, here? A man
walked up and wanted to go into the emergency room. I asked him who he was, and he said it was Justice of the Peace Unknown. I told him he could not go in because there was probably nothing he could do. He said, okay. And then he went on. Later, the hospital administrator came out looking for this JP. I told him I'd turn him back, and he said, turn him back? Man, he owns the body. And I replied, what body? And he said, I guess you're right.
He doesn't know that JFK has died at the moment. He doesn't know that JFK is dead.
Wow, that's heavy.
This was the first official. I guess you're right. If you see him again, we need him to authorize the removal of the body. This was the first official word I had that the president was dead. Officer Elsie Gray walked up and asked me if I'd heard about Officer Tippett, misspelled. I said no, and he told me that Officer Tippett, misspelled, had stopped a suspect who was killed and that they were looking for the suspect in Oak Cliff.
They're all up in a frenzy, yeah.
Mrs. Cabell walked up and asked if Mr. Cabell was in the emergency room and asked me to ask him if he wanted her to come in.
What the hell was Cabell doing in the emergency room, Jim?
Yeah, very good question. Yes. What the F would he have any business being
exactly
there? To make sure the man was dead. I went inside to ask him before I could say anything. He said, does your radio work? I said, yes. He said, come on. And we went to my motorcycle and we passed his wife in the hallway. He told her that he would be right back. We got to my motor. He told me to call a dispatcher, has him get a Justice of the Peace to the hospital in a hurry. I did. We went back inside. He went back into the emergency room, and an agent got me by the arm and told me he had information that the airplane had been moved, wanted me to find out where it was, and arrange for an escort back to Love Field.
That's what Douglas Jackson is going through. All right. Let me get out of here because I want to zero in on his, here. Okay. Whoops. This is not... Okay. Can you see this right here? I saw the president assassinated. You guys here?
The morning of November 22nd.
No. I did. Before you go on there, this is the manuscript. Okay. So you guys can see the actual document. This is the one, okay, and it's typed out because this is the product of Henry Wade's clerk going and transcribing. See, the manuscript that Douglas Jackson wrote was in cursive, in his own handwriting, all right? And it sat there at Henry Wade's office probably for years.
How many pages is it?
It's 6 right here. As you can see here at the top, okay?
You mean 6 in the typescript?
In the typescript, exactly.
On the
exactly.
handwritten, what was it, 15 or something, maybe 20?
I don't know, but when I approached Douglas Jackson Jr. about it, he said, first of all, I was trying to get this from him, all right, and he said no. This is a very personal thing of the family, and what we're considering is giving it to the 6th floor museum. And I said to myself, okay. But as I kept looking, hey, wait a minute. As I kept looking in Weisberg's website, lo and behold, in a very, very obscure part of it, I found this document, which is the one that Henry Wade prepared for Harold Weisberg. So this is the real deal. Okay.
Very good.
And we can go over this, maybe
Sure.
next week or something in detail, but I mean, it is just,
I'll read it, Larry.
Okay. We'll go ahead. I saw the president assassinated. This is from Douglas Jackson, written on, and again, Jim, why is he the only one? Bobby Hargis was not asked to do this. James Chaney was not asked, and B.J. Martin was not asked to do this. Why was Douglas Jackson the only one?
It is very curious.
Absolutely.
November 22nd, 1963 started out to be cold and rainy and a dark day. I made the detail at 6:45 along with many other officers. I had escorted President Kennedy in 1961 when he came to Dallas to visit with Mr. Sam Rayburn, who was in Baylor Hospital in serious condition. That day when we got back to Love Field, Mr. Kennedy shook my hand and thanked me for the escort. This time I was hoping that I could escort the president again. I thought I'd probably have to work a corner instead. In detail, I was assigned to ride on the right-hand side and slightly to the rear of the presidential limousine.
That is key, Jim. That is so freaking key right there. He's telling you right there where he was supposed to be.
The original plan was to have 2 officers ride on the left of the car and 2 on the right of the car. These officers were to ride one behind the other to keep anyone from getting too near the president, but he did not want this. So we were changed so as to ride side by side at the rear bumper of the car, which was only slightly behind the president. Remember, they were instructed to ride behind the rear wheels, which one of them said was the damnedest formation they'd ever seen.
That's right.
We rode our motorcycles out of the garage that morning in the rain. We were required to be on our assignments at 10 that morning. The planes were due to land at about 11:30. I got to Love Field a little after 9, and it had about quit raining. By 10, it was beginning to clear off. The planes landed at about 11:35. There were 3 of them. The first 2 carried the staff, the White House press, and other dignitaries. The third was Air Force One, which carried the president. We lined up our motorcycle escorts preparing for the departure. The motorcade was to be led by Chief Lumpkin, who was to be about 6 blocks ahead, followed by Sergeant Bella with 2 motorcycle jockeys who were about to be 3 blocks ahead. Then Sergeant Ellis, that would be their supervisor, Stavis Ellis, with 4 jockeys 1 block ahead. Then Chief Curry, only a few feet ahead of the president's car. I was riding beside Jim Chaney on the right side of the president's limousine. B.J. Martin and Bobby Hargis were riding on the left side of the car. Sergeant Smart and 4 other jockeys were bringing up the rear behind the Secret Service car. There was hundreds of people standing on the curbs as we came out of Love Field. It was to be this way all the way to the market hall. The people would walk out into the street as the first motorcycle went by, so Chief Curry told him over the radio to fall back to about 50 feet ahead of his car.
Hey, Jim and Gary, doesn't it strike you the detail that this guy is providing?
It's like you were there because he was.
He was there, but I'm talking about the detail. Detail.
I mean, back then, people
you're talking about his recollection of the details.
Exactly.
And his ability to articulate. He may have been more gifted as a writer than the other 3, by the way.
Absolutely.
People were better educated back then. They were just smarter.
On Lemon Ave, 4900 block near Loma Alto, some people on the right-hand curb were holding a long sign said, JFK and LBJ, stop and shake our hands. Mr. Kennedy had his driver stop, and he told these people to come on, and they walked over to his car, and they did shake his hand. I saw people start to run toward his stopped car from as far as a block ahead of us. Jim Cheney called by radio to Chief Curry, and he started backing up toward the presidential car. Sergeant Ellis and the four jockeys turned around and started toward us. The Secret Servicemen dismounted and ran to the car, started moving the people away. Then we started moving again. Chief Lumpkin called Chief Curry and told him the crowd was extra heavy at Turtle Creek and Lemon. And he replied, that's all right. We'll take care of it. We have a good motorcycle escort. Sergeant Ellis and his four got the crowd pushed back, and we proceeded without too much interference. The closer we got to downtown, the heavier the crowd got, and the more they would walk out toward the president. If one of them got pretty close, a Secret Service man
Would leave his car.
would leave his car and get on the back of the presidential car so he could be close enough to Mr. Kennedy to protect him.
See photos of Clint Hill doing that specifically.
We traveled west on Cedar Springs to Harwood, then south on Harwood to Main Street without too much trouble with a crowd. But as we traveled west on Main, the crowd was heaviest of all, and they wouldn't back up. Several times, my right handlebar and right hand hit people in the stomach because they weren't watching me. They were only looking at the president. Long about Arkansas Street, the crowd was so heavy and they wouldn't back up. So rather than bump them, I slacked back and was riding directly behind Jim Cheney. A young man ran out from the crowd from behind me and ran past me on my left, which put him between me and the presidential limousine. As he ran by me, I saw that he was carrying a small camera already placed to his eye because he didn't get to take the close-up picture of the president because one of the Secret Servicemen caught him just in front of my motor and bodily threw him between me and Jim Cheney into the crowd.
That's nasty. That's nasty. They picked the.
Last glance I got of the crowd, there were people still falling. About this time, I saw ahead of me, standing in the street, a lady holding an umbrella.
The first time we hear about any other one.
This is the only other umbrella I've ever heard of.
The type that.
The type that had long metal piece on the
tip.
And I rode up behind Jim Cheney, forcing people to back up. But this lady didn't right then. The agent left his car, got to the rear of the presidential. I got closer and closer to her, forcing her back into the crowd. After we passed her, the agent went back to his car. I mean, with a long metal tip that could be used as a weapon.
There are things that are going on here that have never.
The presidential protection is like non-existent right now.
That's right. Yeah.
You don't know.
You got it, Gary. We traveled west on Main, then turned north on Houston without too much trouble with a crowd. Then we turned west onto Elm Street, fateful. Drove only a short way, traveling very slowly. About that time, I heard what I thought was a car backfire, and I looked around and then to the president's car in time for the next explosion and saw Mr. Connolly jerk back to his right. And it seemed that he looked right at me. I could see a shocked expression on his face. And I thought, someone is shooting at them. I began stopping my motor and looking. I looked straight ahead.
Stopping my motor, Jim. That is so important. I began stopping my motor.
Yeah, well, the whole limo then is already stopped. And I looked straight ahead, first at the railroad overpass, saw only one policeman standing on the track directly over the street. I looked then back to my right and behind, then looked back toward Mr. Kennedy and saw him hit in the head. He appeared to have been hit just above the right ear. The top of his head flew off away from me.
Away from me, which is exactly what we were talking about the other day, remember? Away from him. So that theory of Hook and company, about Jackie or Greer, like you mentioned.
I don't know how Richard lost his way on such a fundamental point.
If Bree is not going in that direction.
Mrs. Conley pulled him toward pulled him toward her, he meant, but he wrote him. Mrs.
Right.
Connolly pulled Mr. Connolly down and she slid down in the seat. I knew that the shooting was coming from my right rear. That's odd.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, exactly.
Because
Yeah.
it actually wasn't coming from his
Of
right
course.
rear.
But you
And
know why they put that there. You know why they
Yeah,
put that.
sure. I think that was an add-in. And I look back that way, but
You don't think they edited? You don't think they edited this before they typed it up or they fixed it?
I think, I'm sorry to say, I think they did.
But
And
even though it's got a lot of good information.
Do we have the original handwritten so we could
Oh,
compare?
no, we don't. No, we don't.
Looking back to the front again, I saw the Secret Service agent lying down across the car over Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy. That would be Clint Hill. And the presidential limousine was beginning to pick up speed. So, see, they've obliterated that it was actually stopped. And the Secret Service men were running past the presidential car, drawing their guns as they ran.
Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any
Right.
sense, does it?
Right. So they've juxtaposed the sentence. That's what they've done.
But
They've juxtaposed that about the beginning to pick up speed. You that came after they
you
were.
cannot have one with and the other. You can't have them both.
Right. I said to Jim Cheney that let's go with him, and we sped away. He pulled past the president's car and up toward Chief Curry's car.
This is
Curry,
exactly where they fixed it, Jim. This is exactly the point where they fixed his statement. Said, you are not going to talk about writing up the no, right?
Yeah. Whoever
was
was typing, it was either directed to change it or thought he got it wrong. But how in the hell could he correct the statement of an eyewitness?
Right.
Chief Curry came on the radio and notified dispatcher a shooting had occurred. We were en route to Parkland Code 3 and to notify them to stand by. As we were traveling north on Stemmons Freeway, Agent Hill raised up, looked over toward me and shook his head from side to side and held his hand thumb down. He knew at that time, as I did, the president of the United States was dead or dying. Well, he was dead. We were driving at a high rate of speed, and people along the shoulder of the freeway, not knowing what had taken place, were trying to get a closer look at the president, would run into the street in front of us. A very dangerous thing to do.
Notice it. Back up a little bit, because notice how this has been embellished by somebody who has been editing, because he cannot. Again, he says at the end of the paragraph, he knew at that time, as I did, that the president of the United States was dead or dying. But then again, when he has an encounter with Cabell at the hospital, he doesn't know at that moment that the president is dead.
About to say that.
Very good. That's very good.
Okay? At that moment, he turned away the first justice of the peace because he didn't know.
Right. You're right.
All right.
We were very good. We were driving at a high rate of speed, and people along the shoulder, not knowing what we're trying to get a closer look, would run into the street, a very dangerous thing to do. After we passed Market Hall, we had no trouble with pedestrian traffic, but the automobile traffic was heavy.
I scrolled up.
It
Seemed like an eternity, but we finally got to Parkland Hospital. I got off my motor, stepped over to the presidential limousine. An agent opened the car door and started to get Mr. Kennedy out, but Mrs. Kennedy said no. It's no need, she said, and raised up from over Mr. Kennedy. I could see the top of his head was gone. His left eye was bulged out of the socket.
Left eye, not right.
The agent said, "Oh no," and started crying, pulled his coat off and placed it over Mr. Kennedy's head.
That was Hill who did that.
I saw someone rolling a stretcher up, and I said, "Let's get Mr. Johnson out then." Thinking that Mr. Connolly was Mr. Johnson, reached in the car and got a hold of him under his arm. Some other officer got a hold of Mr. Connolly. We laid him on the stretcher, and he was taken inside. I looked back to Mr. Kennedy as Mrs. Kennedy said, "All right, but I'm going with him." I reached in and got a hold of him at his shoulders and helped lay him on a stretcher. I stepped back and some agents started pushing Mr. Kennedy into the hospital. Mrs. Kennedy walked beside the stretcher. As we got to the door to the emergency room,
an agent told me to take up a post here.
There's a black border that comes here repeatedly, Larry.
Okay, as I got to the
we got to the door to the emergency room, an agent told me to take up a post here and not let anyone but doctors and nurses in. Some women and a small boy walked up and asked, "Is it true the president was shot?" And I said, "Yes." "How bad is he hit?" she said. And I said, "I don't know, ma'am. And if I did, I could not tell you." Mr. Pokey Wright, a retired deputy chief of police, walked up and told me to clear the hallway. And I, along with some Secret Service agents, asked everybody to leave the hallway and did get it cleared out. This was the first chance I had to relax a little bit. And as I lit a cigarette, I noticed I had blood on my hands. Looking, I had blood on my left sleeve, down the left side of my riding breeches, and on the outside of my left boot.
Left. All this is left side, and he's on the right.
I suppose I got this on me as I helped get Mr. Kennedy out of the car.
Bullshit. That was no.
That was from the actual shot.
Exactly.
A man walked up and wanted to go in the emergency room. Asked him who it was. He said it was the justice of the peace. Blah blah blah. I told him he
Okay,
could
yeah,
not.
this is we already covered this. I told him he could not go.
But for
Yeah, go ahead. Go right ahead. Go ahead.
I got the blank again. I got the
Right. This is a piece. He doesn't remember the name, the specific name. That's all that is.
You just got to scroll. No, I know,
Right.
Larry. I'm
Yeah.
seeing a big black border here over the text. Because there's
Oh.
probably nothing he could do. He said, okay, then he went on. Later, the hospital administrator came out looking for this JB. I told him I'd turn him back, and he said, turned him back? Man, he owns a body. And I replied, what body? And I said, I guess you're right. If you see him again, we need him to authorize the removal of the body. This was the first official word I had that the president was dead. Officer Elsie Gray walked up and asked me if I'd heard about Officer Tippett misspelled. I said no. He told me Officer Tippett misspelled and stopped the suspect that was killed, and that they were looking for the suspect in Oak Cliff.
Now about this hospital administrator, he obviously would have known that an autopsy was required. Okay, and this about him also being involved in getting the justice of the peace there to sign off, on the death certificate and get the body out of there as soon as possible, does not seem to jive at all, either. This person, if it was an official administrator, or was it, who knows, who came out and said, hey, this has to be like this, when, it appears that thing about having the autopsy done by the coroner, and we know what happened, the whole story about Rose, has any relationship here with this. Of course, they, in their haste, to get that body out of there, they're sort of like, trampling, over all this protocol and rules and regulations, that that are required here,
What
But
he
anyway,
says about what he says about taking the body out of the car is a little discrepant with what that Jackie resisted in the past, wouldn't let him take him out, and then after they
Right.
pried him out of her arms,
Mhm.
she composed herself before she walked in and turned toward Pepper Jenkins and gave him the chunk of Jack's skull and brains in her
Mhm.
hands.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
don't have that from Douglas Jackson here.
No, he's it's another point of view, obviously, of course.
There's a lot
Yeah.
going on around him to see everything.
Yeah. Well, if you go and you track down how many people helped JFK out of the limo, I think the count is about 30 people. It couldn't have been 30 people. Okay. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it would have been only a few. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Shall I
Okay. So,
reread the rest, although we did.
yeah, well,
Miss-
we're here, and Mr. and Mrs. Cabell, and
Right.
so the point of all this.
Okay, there's a part here I had not read yet. So let me complete it. Mrs. Cabell walked up and asked if Mr. Cabell was
In the emergency room.
emergency room, and asked me to ask him if he wanted her to come in. I went inside to ask him, and before I could say anything, he said, "Does your radio work?" And I said, "Yes."
Why
He's
would
like,
Mrs. Cabell be wanting to go into the emergency room? Hell, come on.
Just to be with her husband,
And we passed his wife in the hallway and told her he'd be right back. We got to my motor. He told me to call a dispatcher and have him get a justice of the peace to the hospital in a hurry. I did. We went back inside. He went into the emergency room. An agent got me by the arm told me he had information that the airplane had been moved, wanted me to find out where it was and arrange for an escort back to Love Hill. I like to never found a phone in that hospital that wasn't busy.
Yeah, that's a misprint.
Yeah, of course, of course.
One line.
Yeah, one line had already been hooked up direct to Washington. I finally got a line and called the dispatcher's office. I told him who I was, that I understand the airplanes had been moved, instructed him to contact the Love Field officer and to instruct him to pick up the escort at the entrance to Love Field and lead it to the president's plane. He asked if I was going to escort the president's body back to Love Field, and I told him that I did not know. I then looked for the agent to tell him that everything was set and was unable to locate him, so I went back to the door to the emergency room. Shortly, some officer walked up and told me they were taking the president out the other door. Come on, he said. I walked outside. Just as they were putting the casket into the hearse, someone said, Jackson, a Secret Service agent, was looking for you. Sergeant Steve Stavis asked me.
It's not Ellis?
Yeah, Stavis Ellis asked me if I was going to.
No, that's what I said. The word says Steve, but I said Stavis. I added the
Yeah,
word
no problem.
asked me if I was going to escort the body to Love Hill, and I said I didn't know about that. At the time, the agent walked up and asked if I'd arranged for the escort, and
I said yes. I'm ready to go.
I said yes. I'm ready to go when you are. Officer James Taylor asked me if I wanted him to go with me, and I said yes, and turned to Sergeant Ellis and told him that Taylor and I were going to make the escort to Love Hill. With that, we left. As Chief's car played out in front of us, until we got onto Hines Boulevard, then he mentioned for us to take the lead. We did, made a usual funeral escort using only red lights and whistle to clear traffic to Love Hill, where the president was placed back on Air Force One. D.L. Jackson, 1410, Dallas Police Department.
Gripping stuff, huh? Gripping.
That was like watching a movie, the whole thing, in a different way, you know? I mean, just minute by minute, in the clear.
Well, again, when you combine the knowledge of Earle Cabell as being CIA, being the brother of the deputy director of CIA, this whole thing going on in Dallas. I mean,
he's as guilty as LBJ.
The deputy director whom JFK had removed from office.
Right. You know, and all this animosity, you know, and of course, you know, I mean, now more than ever, JFK should have never gone to Dallas.
They clearly edited that part, that crucial part of the limo stop. They did not want that in there, and they did it awkwardly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they're not only awkwardly, but they are
obvious inconsistency. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good, Gary. Good spotting. Good stuff. A great number 10.
Now, where does this, you know, fall in the whole scheme of what we're trying to do here is that we're trying to get a ranking of the most important revelations from the document releases from 2017 on to 2021. Okay.
Right.
And so this is going to, you know, create the first level there, and then we're going to go to the next.
Larry, this is a good one. It certainly deserves to be in the top 10, and that it's number 10 and is this significant is striking.
And not only that, and it's just one piece of paper, because we did not get any part of this 201 file. You know, there's just this one, probably some clerk, you know, inadvertently, you know, left it out, you know, and whatever, and it got scanned, you know.
I think there was deliberate editing. I think he did an original transcript and then it was edited and he was told to retype it.
Yeah. No, but I'm talking about Earle Cabell, the Earle Cabell document in that was released. It's only one, you know, and you see where I'm going is that you only got one document on Earle Cabell. You don't have his 201 file. You don't have any more information on who he was and what relationship he had with the CIA. That's where I'm going. Okay. You even
wonder why they
would even release anything like that.
Why would they even release that he was CIA? I think
exactly. So
that had to be
But what
That
it
had to be an
does,
accident.
but what it does is it creates that entire different scenario for Dallas. That's what it does.
Oh, of course it does. Of course it does.
You know, and
Good.
when you combine that with Douglas Jackson, that's why, you know, things don't seem to be
Yeah.
have any relationship with each other until you start to dig. And you know, in this case, you know, the
It's
thing
good,
with
Larry. It's good.
Yeah, well, we've always been super suspicious with him being the brother of, you know, the two Cabell brothers, but this really,
and another of the big find, which will come later, is obviously the relationship that Charles Cabell had with Clay Shaw. You know, that one document that, you know, had Jim Garrison had gotten his hands on that, you know, would have been a whole different ball game, you know, as far as the Clay Shaw trial and how Jim Garrison approached that.
Yeah, and you can see why they were scared shitless of what Garrison was doing.
Yeah, and a lot of the in this ranking, you're going to see that I would have to say 7 or maybe 6 of the documents, the big finds, are CIA related. So
Yep.
yeah,
Very good. Very good. Very good.
CIA everywhere, constantly confirming what we already know.
yeah, right. Well, that's why they've been, you know, hanging on to these tooth and nail, you know, Gary. I mean, what do you want?
No, that was just invigorating, man. Just, it's like I was there. You know, sometimes when you're reading a book, you just feel like you're there, and hearing all of that, it was, I mean,
If they had re-edited that, it would have been so much more telling.
Well, and you know who has the original, if I'm not mistaken, if things went the way that, you know,
the
they were
curator,
going, you know, with Douglas Jackson's son, that the Sixth Floor Museum has, that's the final repository, you know, of
they
the
have a little
documents.
furnace up there.
It doesn't matter because Henry Wade and Harold Weisberg were able to give us a facsimile of the document. And that's why, I mean, you know, if you go and look at this whole story that we've told tonight, you know, Henry Wade and Weisberg, and then the connection here with Douglas Jackson, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Larry, I wonder if they could have even kept a copy. Maybe Xerox wasn't much
Who
in
knows?
use.
Who knows? Who knows? But you know, at
We,
least
we,
the
we
gist-
need to pursue this another step and see if we can get a copy of the original handwritten.
No, you gotta talk to Stephen Fagan over there, Jim. You know that guy?
Never even heard of him.
He's the curator at the Sixth Floor Museum. He's the one that took
yeah.
Gary Mack's. He's the one that took Gary Mack's place.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you two are gonna get along just fine.
I heard that they're selling a Murder in Dealey Plaza there at
You ain't messing with us on that.
the
They will burn in hell before that book ever makes it to the shelf in almost anywhere around Dealey Plaza.
All right, take us out, Gary. Take us out.
I think I'll do that. This has been JFK show number 273. As I said before, confirm what we already know with more and more evidence coming out.
This
all
is
the time.
countdown number 10 of the top
That's
10.
right.
since
We
the
got 9 to go.
documents have been released.
9 to
9 to
go.
go and a surprise. 9 to go and a surprise bonus at the end.
You got
Come back
All
for
right,
number
fellas.
9. Number 9 next week.
Yeah, y'all stay tuned. We'll see you next week with more stuff.